I can see that people are just starting to join. So what we'll do is we'll give it a minute or two and then we'll kick off. I can see that somebody has enabled closed captioning, which is good. That will help with my accent. We'll just give it one more minute. And Graham, if you want to share your slides. Okay, so what we might do is we might get started. We can see quite a few people have joined, but what we'll do is, in the interest of time, we'll kick off. So my name is David Gary, and I'm the Senior Director of Customer Success for Sumo Logic in the APJ region. And we'd like to welcome you to the first of our best practice webinar series. What we wanted to do was run a series of webinars where we talked about the value you can get from the Sumo Logic platform. And what we're doing today is talking about alerting strategies. The way it's going to work today, I've got my colleagues Rick Jury and Graham Watts on the line, and they're going to be presenting today. We're going to allow for time at the end to have questions and answers, but we're actually going to have some fun polls along the way. And the good news is we've got some prizes to go along with them. So what I might do is pass over to Rick and Graham.
Thanks, David. My name is Graham. I am a technical account manager here based in Sydney, although I come from Denver, so I don't sound very Australian. But Rick and I are excited to present how to alert smarter and improving your alert strategy with these 5 key recommendations. So I'll just jump right into it. First thing we want to start with is, what are the problems that we might solve today? So a common issue that customers talk to us about are things like traditional monitoring not working anymore. Another one is customers or users are reporting problems before they're aware of them. So maybe it comes through their support channels or an angry tweet by a user, and that's happening before the engineering team actually knows there's an issue. One other item that we help with is teams getting overloaded with false alarms, false alerts, high number of false positives, and it's taking too long to diagnose the cause of problems. And finally, not having a clear idea of what types of alerts we send and where. So basically just a good understanding of what your own alert posture is, and how to define and document what your response should be to those alerts. So I'm going to now just start up a poll and go ahead and answer in the Slack poll area. I've just started the poll, and we'll see which one of these problems you can relate to the most. See quite a few answers coming in. And again, we're just, go ahead. Sorry, David.
We can see some common themes there.
Definitely, I'll share the results. And we're just, again, we're just wondering, which one of these challenges can you relate to the most, or maybe most interested in figuring out how to solve from today. So I'll wait a few more seconds, and then I will go ahead and end the poll. Still have about a third of people who haven't replied. So if you'd like to answer, go ahead and answer in the poll section. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And I'll share these results. So it looks like, if everyone can see those results, teams being overloaded is the main challenge, followed by customers reporting issues first, and third, not having a clear idea of what your alerting posture is. That's pretty interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And so what are our 5 key principles that we'll talk about today? The first one is what to measure. Choosing what to measure is probably one of the most fundamental questions. Also, how do we then measure that? Followed by deciding who is going to respond to alerts once we know what we measure and how. And then where to route those alerts so they're effective and we can resolve them and troubleshoot them effectively. And the final one is tuning your alerts. So small incremental improvements over time. And all of these things should help you with at least one of those challenges that we just listed. So what should we alert on? I'm going to pass it to Rick to show us a diagram around impact and alerting strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. So it's good to visualize your process of root cause and troubleshooting as narrowing the problem domain until you arrive at a root cause. In terms of alerting, we need a balanced alerting strategy because the alerts that show root cause specifically tend to be poor at detecting the unknown unknowns that we see in modern digital environments. So we want to be alerted about when business impact is high or user experience is affected as well. So if you bring up the first box. So if we're to create layer another dimension on that, which is we can have one axis, which is the width of the problem domain and the narrowness of the root cause. And then along the bottom, we've got a correlation to business or user impact going from low to high or a strong correlation. So this first box here is our traditional monitoring, as people used to call it. So that's your disk, your CPU, your memory, and alerts that are very specific to one technology domain. That's very much how traditional monitoring worked. And the biggest problem with that in modern microservices environments is it has a very low correlation to actual real user impact for key business transactions. So if we bring up the next one. Now here we're talking about known issues. Known issues are an important part of your strategy that should come out of, say, your post-mortem process, because it shows you and your customers that you're not making the same mistakes again, and you're detecting any issues that do come up very quickly. But once again, this is not really going to help us that much with the unknown unknowns, those new problems that come up all the time in a complex environment. Next, we have golden signals. This is an SRE concept that's become very popular. The reason that golden signals, that's your latency, requests, errors, and throughput, are so popular is because while they tend to not tell you why anything is broken, they're much better at detecting problems early and much closer towards that, that correlation end of impact. And finally, the last point we've got there is business process alerts. And it's very important where you have, say, a shopping cart or a registration process, and you know how to detect if that process is broken, that you put in specific alerts for that. And this is even more the case that we'll have a very wide problem domain potentially, but we'll know very early that there is a problem immediately. A good example I can think of is one of our customers that alert on the number of visits to their status page, because they concluded that if people are going to their status page, that something must be wrong, even if they have no idea what it is. So that's a good example of looking at that really early warning, but very wide type of alert. So if we go to the next slide. Now we've got our first fun poll. What we're going to do with the fun polls is we want you to put your answer just in the chat, the everyone chat channel in Zoom. This is an AI text to image that we've generated a bunch of these for the talk. And what we want you to do here is what SRE principle do you think was used as the AI image prompt to generate this image? And David will be tracking answers and awarding prizes after that.
Yep.
This is finished.
Yeah, fabulous prizes, amazing prizes. But yep, please feel free to pop into the chat window what you believe the image was generated, what phrase was used to generate that image.
And you don't have to get the modifiers right. We're just talking about the high level here. Do you want to put the answer up, Graham?
Yep. I didn't. Have you guys seen any responses come in?
Not yet, but I think people are just shy.
Oh, it says
Chat
chat
is
is disabled. Let's see how I can enable that. Okay, I think I figured it out. Thanks, Alan, for flagging that. Can you try by testing and sending a chat? Nice. There it is. So let's try that again. Go ahead and put what prompt you think we used for this. Gamify, that's a good one. See a few good ones in there.
I think we got a winner, chicken dinner.
We do.
It's all about the color scheme, that one. Yep, that was a giveaway.
Nice work, Andrew.
I'll pass it back to you, Graham.
Thanks, Rick. So first principle, choosing what to measure. In Rick and I's experience, we always, when we're working with customers in an alerting workshop, a training, maybe it's a customer building a totally new product, or they've, had a SRE team in place for 10 years. We always ask, why are we building the alert? And it starts with measuring the right signals. So we always want to catch new issues, especially in ephemeral environments. But if we use golden signals that indicate business issues as a starting point, that's advantageous, because then you can catch future unknown issues that are having an impact on your user, even if it's 8 months from now and you couldn't have predicted the specific issue that's happening or keywords in your log, for example. So focusing on the end-to-end business process or action is critical there for generating or thinking about what to measure. And then later, it is important to add those specific conditions, right? So if I'm measuring latency, throughput, error rate for my my loan service for specific features there. And I also know that sometimes in the loan service, people are trying to upload an image, important image that's going to verify their identity, and it fails. Then I should probably set up a specific alert for that when image upload fails, for example. So that's going to maybe come from a postmortem. But our main advice here is do not create an alert unless it's actionable. A lot of the times we've helped customers clean up their environment, and there's just a bunch of alerts firing, and people might get them email, Slack, but there's nothing to do when the alert is received, and that's a good indication that you should probably just disable that alert for now. So when thinking about choosing what to measure, I mentioned some of these already, but latency, traffic, errors, and saturation, those are a good catch-all. And you could use one or all of them, depending on what your service does. So just thinking logically through and hopefully planning with the product owner, which one of these is more relevant for the thing that I'm building. You might want to use one or multiple. So a few good examples here. Number of successful orders has dropped. I have an e-commerce customer that measures this exact thing where they don't know why it might have dropped, but they can measure the page that says, hey, this has succeeded, and confirming with the customer their order has went through, so they can measure, has that number of occurrences dropped way down. Maybe the latency for orders is taking a long time. If you're a travel booking site or an e-commerce site, or I'm trying to buy a concert ticket or something and it's taking just way too long, I might just go to another vendor, and you could lose the customer that way. So latency is important for experience. Error rate, again, experience is going to be impacted by a high error rate. Maybe that's related to transactions. Some bad examples that we've seen are, hey, the CPU for my order processing server or group of servers is high. We probably don't want to alert on that because it's potentially a symptom, but it's not very actionable. There are cases though where you have more of a pet server where that might apply, but in this example, in a ephemeral environment, maybe not. Another bad one, maybe there's a spike in the word error. I see this a lot where maybe a newer user to Sumo or a user that's newer to an observability tool, they'll say my data space error. And what's wrong with that is it's not specific enough, and it might be alerting on many different kind of junk words in the logs that happen to have error, but aren't actually a true error. So when thinking about the what category here, we actually give you out-of-the-box golden signals. And if you're using some of our observability products, whether it's pulling in this case, CloudWatch metrics, you can actually go to these dashboard panels, click right on the panel, and then get the search that's showing you, how do I measure latency? How do I measure requests and error percent? And then you could use that directly. We also derive metrics from tracing. So if you're using OpenTelemetry and you're sending tracing into Sumo, we're going to generate a free set of metrics you can then use natively in our metrics engine, as well as trace events that you can query in the log query window. So when we look at AWS observability, you can drill into that Explore tab and start to see panels that represent measuring some of these golden signals. We also have the same for Kubernetes. So in our Kubernetes observability solution, you're going to see potentially useful measurements that could indicate some golden signals. And we also have something called the Root Cause Explorer. So if you haven't seen this, it's another option in the Plus New window. It's a little yellow tab. And basically what we're doing is we have a data science team calculating events of interest that are telling you the drift from normal. And my main advice here is to go ahead and use the filter feature when you're viewing this to filter down on something that you know or care about. But basically, we're trying to show you anomalies when you're troubleshooting. So this is called the Root Cause Explorer. So now we're going to do a second fun poll, prizes included, and go ahead and tell us what image prompt you think we used to generate this interesting image over here.
I think we got another winner. So I think Noel has absolutely nailed it. Burning server room.
We're pretty close, definitely a fire there. And Rick, I'm going to pass it over to you now to demo on going from bad to better to best when thinking about setting up and what to measure here.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, so we talked a lot about theory. Now we're going to jump into something a little bit more specific. So what I'm going to cover in this section is I'm going to go through some of the actual examples of different types of metrics and logs alerts that you could create in Sumo related to these, these ideas we've been talking about. And I'll show you, as Graham was saying, how we've got some really good places to get started where we have a lot of the common alert scenarios already there in the product and the observability solution. So this first one is a traditional resource monitoring alert. In this case, it's coming from Telegraph procstat metrics from a Linux host. And as we said before, this is all well and good, but it's not close enough to that, that business or user impact. So we need more than this. So we go to the next slide. The second one is a known issue. This is an example here. We're saying in the past, we might have found that every time this SQL error comes up, we know that it's a bad thing because we've had post-mortem actions where we came across this in troubleshooting the problem. So we want to set up alerts for this so that we're right on the ball if this ever happens again, but we need more than that. So we'll go to the next slide. Golden signals, as we've been saying, is a very popular concept for observability these days. if you're in AWS, one of the best places to go for those really easy, fast to implement golden signals is to look at the load balancers in front of your application. So don't worry about the CPU of the host behind the load balancer. Look first at the CloudWatch key metrics that come out of load balancers in AWS. You have in here, we've got like a 500 response code count, so we can count that as an easy way to get like a yardstick of errors for any web service that we happen to be running behind a load balancer in Amazon. So we'll go to the next one. We can take distributed tracing data into Sumo for backend applications or front-end user monitoring as well. And one of the great things we do is not only can you look at the traces and spans in the product and create service maps and whatnot, you can also, we auto-derive these metric from trace key signals for each application that's imported. And this is an example of making a golden signal type alert, but using the trace data metric instead. In this case, it's the service latency for the payment service, which in our mythical coffee bar app is super important. This is getting closer to that front-end user impact example that we were talking about with that graph earlier. Here we have an alert on a key business process. We know that if we see errors in the checkout process for this particular mythical travel app here, that it's a bad thing because someone tried to book something and it failed. So we want to monitor that because we know that anytime there's too many errors in this checkout process, it's bad for business, it's bad for revenue. So we may have literally no idea why the checkout system is failing, but the fact that it is failing should require instant action. We shouldn't be waiting for 2 to 3 hours for the service desk to contact, internally log a ticket saying, hey, 1,000 customers rang up saying they can't book travel, because by that stage, they probably changed to another vendor and it's too late. The next one, please, Graham. And this last one is a bonus. This is what we call missing data alerts. This is an important consideration in the monitors part of Sumo. You'll see this little screenshot on the bottom there. There's a missing data alert type. And this is for scenarios where the absence of data is a problem. Some good examples I can think of from my own experience is if there's a serious problem with your CDN or your WAF, you may literally have no traffic. And even there'll just be no errors, no successes, no nothing. So that's something that you probably want to be alerting on as well. Even if there's important processes, things like backups, you want to alert on the fact that there's no backup messages at all for certain key bits of infrastructure, rather than just saying, oh, there should be a backup failure if it failed. Well, there won't necessarily be. I can tell you over beer some time about a terrible experience I had once where we were in the server room trying to fix something and found that the backup had started 3 months earlier and just hung and never finished. So there was no error, it just never finished. So that's what your missing data, alerts are going to pick up. Go to the next slide. Now, we also want to be able to get started in a tool like Sumo really quickly and get to these golden signals and the key alerts and the key metrics quickly. We have several observability solutions. You can see them through that Explore UI in the product is the easiest way to find them once they're set up. And within that Explore UI, you'll find really good sources for common alerting use cases. So if you go to the next slide. For AWS observability, you can see that we have a list of common services, and those out-of-the-box apps that you get straight away have all your common sort of metrics and logs use cases that you might want to alert on. If you go to the next slide. From a particular panel in there, you can see I could easily drill down to see, how was that panel derived that was pretty close to what I want to create an alert out of. Next slide. We also, in each of our observability solutions like AWS and Kubernetes, it comes with a starter list of common alert scenarios. So you can see there that if I thought, what are the top things I want to monitor for load balancers? What are the top things I want to monitor for API gateways, RDS, DynamoDB? We already have a demo there. All you need to do is basically add the the target threshold and the notifying team, and you're away. For Kubernetes, it's similar. We have a set of Kubernetes alerts for common use cases in Kubernetes that are important for managing your cluster. And finally, for application observability, that's where we're talking about distributed tracing data. We have several hierarchies for tracing data in Sumo. Here you can see for the coffee service, through those derived metrics, not only can I see there's some panels there where I can dig into traces and spans or service maps, I can see the latency, the requests and the errors, and those would be the bread and butter of golden signals that I could pull out to monitor any service that I had tracing data coming into Sumo on. That's another example there of, I guess it's just showing that there's a service tracing screen in Sumo, and those derived metrics are actually what drive those components behind the scenes. The service map, the root cause explorer is all driven off that second level derived metric data. Next slide. We also, like you, we want to define stuff as code because that's awesome. So we have a Terraform provider for Sumo, and we have this Terraform library here that has like a monitor packages modules for a lot of common technologies that you can onboard into Sumo. You can see there's a big list there. It goes well off the page, but that will cover off if you're thinking, what would my common monitors be for, say, Nginx or Kafka or Elasticsearch or Cassandra or whatever it might be. You'll find it there. It's easy to customize because it's a Terraform module. You can tweak it how you want, and then load that up with the correct groups and notifications that you want. Next slide. Right, we're up to fun poll number 3. I've got to warn you in advance. This one is tough.
I was going to say that congratulations to Andrew and Noel that won Fun Poll 1 and Fun Poll 2. I'll be arranging and sending out Sumo goodie bags. But for this one, I'm going to arrange something special. But Rick, back to you.
Yep. So yeah, once again, we want to know, what do you think the AI prompt might have been for this one? As I say, it could be challenging, but we'll see what you can come up with. Do you want to click the button, Graham, to get the question up? Here we go. Magical time machine.
Magical time machine.
I wish I had one of those sometimes when I, a few hours into an outage.
I like the alliteration of chaotic color machine.
Chaos. I like Anna's suggestion, IT storage room. We might give it a couple more seconds. New Age security watch room. Now, the challenge with this is picking an answer that was closest to the prompt that was used to generate this. So I might have to pick a random answer on this one. But I think, Rick, we can show the phrase.
Yep. There it is. What to measure in Kubernetes. That's
apparently even AI is confused about that.
Yep, it's a complex domain indeed, and a very deep specialist area. Right, I'll pass it back to you, Graham.
Thanks, Rick. So next principle, we just talked about what to measure. Now we're thinking about how to measure. And so usually we want to think about which telemetry in terms of how to measure. What data do we have? That can be logs, metrics, or tracing usually. So you might ask yourself, should I use a monitor? I've seen that today. Should I use SLOs, SLIs, define my indicator, set my objective? Should I then, if I have SLOs, alert off of error budgets being burned down? And so none of these are right or wrong, but we'll talk through each one. And Sumo Logic has a reliability management functionality so that you can define exactly what we just said there. You can do successful over total or unsuccessful over total. And then we basically generate a data set for you that says how many windows were successful or unsuccessful. So the thing I really like about our reliability management and SLO product is we've taken the Google SRE methodology and we've productized it in a nice tab for you. So if you've read the SRE handbook or you already adhere to this, you'll find the UI probably closely matching with what you know, and probably be a pretty straightforward experience to set up. So you basically, again, pick your indicator measured by successful over total. And then you choose your target, your compliance type, compliance period, et cetera. And so now I'm going to go ahead and just to get some information on SLOs and how people are using them, I'm going to launch a poll. This is more of an official poll that you should see pop up. And the question is, where is your organization at in adoption of SLOs? So just curious to get your feedback on if you've already set these up, or you can see all the options there. And you can see a nice even distribution. So again, we're just doing a quick poll on SLOs, what's happening in your team or company, and how have you adopted these? We're at about halfway there. I'll wait a few more seconds, and if anybody else wants to respond, we have about 50% of people in the poll so far. Yep, a few more seconds, and I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And so I'll share the results. And I think this pretty closely matches up, Rick, would you say, with what we see? A lot of teams
absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of teams have implemented for some services or some teams in their organization, but then it's really seems very different by industry and company and even team.
Yeah, because it's bigger than just a tool. There's a process that has to go around it, and and even sort of like an ideology of how your applications are measured and managed over time too. It's part of it.
Yep, and a lot of internal agreements, right, between the developers and the SRE team and the product owner. So I think it's one thing to set up SLOs in Sumo. It's another to kind of practice them as a methodology, definitely. So I'm going to hop over to the next slide now, thinking still about how to measure. Monitors, here's just some useful features. If you do determine a monitor is right for you, and we'll share our contact information, feel free to ask us after this if you need some advice, and the Sumo field team can definitely help you with this. But if you do choose a monitor as the right path, a few features to be aware of. One is alert grouping. The way I think of this is, let's say I have 500 customers, and I want to write an alert that says, does any one of these customers have high error rate? You actually don't need to write 500 alerts. You can just write one alert and then group by the field that represents customer, like some unique ID. So I could say, what's my error rate? Group by customer ID. And that one alert is going to be smart enough to send me if any of those 500 lines in error rate is spiking. So this one is really like a time saver. It's a way to not need to make discrete alerts for every single entity in a group. You can instead group the alert. Also multiple levels, warn and critical. So you could send, one common example is if I'm reaching a danger area, maybe 80% saturation, I'll send a critical Slack notification to my alert Slack channel. If I hit 95 critical level, then I can send multiple destinations. So I can say, send that to a Slack urgent alert channel and create an object in PagerDuty, or create a Jira ticket. So we have multiple levels and destinations. Each level of critical or warn can send one or more places. So that allows you to kind of fan out and get more specific as if the situation is getting worse. We also have a playbook option that allows you to route instructions dynamically to whoever's responding. And alert response, which ties into the playbook idea, where we want that responder to land somewhere contextual so they can resolve the issue faster. So one additional one here is outlier-based monitors, as well as benchmarking with time compare. The way I think about these is, what if the data before, historical data, either recent or benchmarking in the past, is significant for me to calculate whether this should fire as an alert? That's when we can think about outlier and time compare. So this is one of my favorite ones. Benchmark this Wednesday versus the last 2 Wednesdays on average. I like this one because it can benchmark Sunday night versus a normal Sunday night, rather than Sunday night versus the previous Friday, Saturday, which may be different in user behavior. So now I'll pass it over to Rick for a demo of what we just showed.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. So we've talked a bit about monitors and SLOs, but now we want to see exactly how we might go about creating those within the product. So there you can see the easiest way to create a monitor is if you have a metrics or a logs query. The little ellipsis button there, you can see we've got create a monitor and create an SLO directly as an option to get started. So if we go to the next slide. So now let's assume we've just chosen that create a monitor option. The first set of options I've got there is what type of monitor I'm measuring. In this case, it's a metric monitor. And I can choose between a static or an outlier detection model. And underneath that, you can see that we have the query and there's an alert grouping feature where we can decide whether we're going to have one alert in total, or we're going to start tracking it per service or per load balancer or per owning team or whatever it might be. And as Graham said, that's a great way to create standardized alerting, say for every service in your Nginx proxy or something, with one single alert. Scrolling down a little bit there, we've got the different types of thresholds that we can create. That there you can see is just how the representation of the alert distribution is trying to help you get a bit of a concept of what alerts would have fired or not in recent history using the outlier model. You might see there's some little triangles there. Those are where the outlier thing would have triggered in that model. And if you scroll down again, now we're getting further down into configuring the alert, we can actually define a playbook. So that's where we can give our users more context within the notification they get on their phone at 3 a.m. That could be a link to some internal reference site that you've got, but we can also support Markdown in there. So you can write a novel in there if you want to. That might be a really specific set of instructions. For SLOs, once again, you can create them from that, create an SLO screen, or within the monitoring section of Sumo, there's a tab for monitors, there's a tab for SLOs and connections and health events. That's how you can sort of come back and find those later. Here I've started to create a new SLO. We can choose whether that's going to be based on a query, which means it's a raw metrics and logs query, or it can be monitor based, which means this is almost hierarchical. It's building off an existing monitor that we've already created rather than being a direct query. And that little flag next to that is whether you want to flag this as what type of golden signal SLO are we measuring here? Latency, errors, throughputs, and here we've chosen errors. Underneath that, you can see we can choose between request and window based. And this is something that I really like about our implementation is you can pick which way you want to measure it. In my experience, window based is generally the best because it kind of balances out the evaluation over a set of time-bound windows. You can go request based though, but that's more subject to a million errors in 15 minutes kind of blowing out your error budget for the month, which you might not necessarily want. If we scroll down from there, we can see how we're going to define the SLI and the SLO. If we scroll down again, we're saying, hey, this is what our target is going to be for our SLO and what the compliance period is going to be. And we have a name. And then if we go down again, this is what it might look like once it's completed. You can see that there's we can see the current state and there's some dashboards and things we can open up there. But one thing to note there is an add an SLO button and you go, well, hey, I created an SLO. What's that for? That's where you can create a higher order of monitor now in Sumo that would be alerting your business owners or your product owners when their error budget or their service level is close to failing for that particular service.
Yep. Thanks, Rick. So now we're going to look at, once you've decided what to measure, how to measure, monitor, SLO, who does these go to? So here's a free kind of prompt in the bottom right where we asked to generate an SRE looking at alerts. Hopefully that's not what it feels like with a little fire in the server room back behind the monitor there. But when you think about who should respond, it's good to decide on, document, and communicate. Those are the three basic things. Who's going to respond to an alert? And one thing that I usually help customers think through is, hey, do you have a central ops team, SRE team, platform team who will do that first round of triage? Or does each feature development team or owners, do they triage their own? Or maybe you don't know the answer and that you just have to start a conversation within the organization of, what is the answer? Maybe you don't have a clear one yet. It's a good conversation to start. So definitely include playbooks. This playbook could just be a generic link to an internal Confluence page that says, see here for all playbooks, right? Just to give some context, you could paste that in for all playbooks, or you can make it specific. You could put a Sumo dashboard in here. I've seen people do that, where my playbook is a link to actually open a Sumo dashboard for our specific service. And that one dashboard will answer 20 different troubleshooting questions just by opening the dashboard. Also, when deciding who, it's best to, again, arm them with the right tools and knowledge. So whoever is going to respond, make sure they know about the alert response page. This is a contextual view. Not shown at the bottom here. If you scroll down on this page, you'll actually see some cards generated by our data science team detecting anomalies. But some of my favorite features are this monitoring history over here, showing you a heat map, and just this giving me context of, is this new or has it been happening for a while? Or how severe is the issue? So having people land on the alert response page and giving them a link in your Slack webhook, for example, is really helpful. You can see there's a little playbook icon here as well. And so when deciding who will respond to alerts, think about their capability in the tool itself. Sumo has a really powerful log query language. We've been building this natively as a microservice architecture in AWS for, I think, 10 or 11, maybe 11 or 12 years now. And so the log query language is very powerful. It can handle extremely high cardinality. And we've noticed that certified users in our tool, in a war room situation, they're going to solve problems faster. So if you have responders, make sure they're certified and they feel at least literate in Sumo, if not advanced. Maybe they have some advanced certifications, so they can iterate quickly and design a new measurement right on the spot. And this is exactly what our engineering team does. When Rick and I are handling a P1 situation, we'll work with our engineering team and we'll be sharing Sumo screens, and we'll be building searches and dashboards to prove and validate different hypotheses we have about why the situation is occurring, so we can then resolve and provide a root cause to the customer. So summary here is get responders certified so they can go beyond just using the log search as a advanced grep looking for keywords. They can go much farther than that. You have schema on read, which means parse at search time. You do not need to have to know the log format. You can parse a log that's a year old or a day old or a minute old in Sumo. And when you hit that search button, you're creating a new schema each time, and that's very powerful. Know how to aggregate. That's how you can see a trend and answer a question more easily over time. And when to use advanced operators, especially log reduce. If there's one feature you didn't use that I highly encourage you to use in a troubleshooting scenario, log reduce is that feature. That's a really interesting one that our co-founder and CTO has a patent on. So I recommend checking that one out. And then know how to put those different data sources, logs, metrics, traces on one dashboard. So you can do things like stack charts and view all in one. I'm going to just speed up a little bit for time so we have time for questions, but here are many certifications we have. These are all free, and you can find them in the little home and then learn area of our UI. So I highly recommend, if you have responders, get them certified, and ask your Sumo field team for some sessions around alerting, and use us to improve the enablement there. But definitely get certified. Take advantage of our free certifications. One last principle here is where those alerts are going. So once you've done all the work to create an alert and understand who's going to respond to it, number one tip here, avoid sending emails. And we're not just picking on emails. We're trying to guide to optimize workflow and tracking. So emails are not very good for workflow and tracking. We recommend sending to an incident response system, something like Opsgenie, Jira, PagerDuty, and define those lists usually in that system so that you know what to do if someone is out or not able to respond. So once you decide these, also just document internally so people have a reference point. New employees can find that and understand it. And in Sumo, you can connect out to many different locations. Each one of these little icons gives you a pre-built JSON blob that the tool on the receiving end understands. So you don't have to dig in their documentation to design the payload. We just designed a standard one for you. And one more fun poll here. Which image prompt do you think we use to generate this interesting image over here?
Yeah, this one's going to be a rapid poll. 30 seconds.
Yep. And I have an answer for Tim. Yes, we do have self-paced certifications, and you can read through or watch recordings. Okay, I think do we have a...
Yeah, I think Tim has pretty much nailed it. A pile of warning signs.
Yep, there's our prompt there. So moving on, just so we have time for questions. The last kind of bonus thing here is once you've done all this work to efficiently design and create a good alerting strategy, you have to make sure to tune your alerts because your services are going to change. So your alerts are going to change, your team members are going to change. And it's good to do this on a recurring basis. Maybe you do it with Sumo team members and if you have a regular cadence with them. But basically you want to review how often things are firing and disable them if they're not actionable or they're firing too much. On a side note here, you can pull in things like PagerDuty data or Jira data and actually visualize in Sumo dashboards what alerts are firing frequently. So if you have an outage, make sure to check your SLO and say, did these line up? Did that outage correlate with our SLO firing or burning down the error budget? If not, you can change the indicator, the SLI, measure something different or differently, or you can change the objective. Maybe it's too strict or not strict enough. So this is an ongoing process, but if you do 1 through 4 well, then you'll have less tuning to do and it will be a bit easier to maintain. So here is a bonus piece of content. In Sumo, not sure if you know this, but you can actually just upload JSON to create dashboards and content in the UI. So this dashboard that I'm going to show in a second will show what's firing often, like I mentioned. And Rick just put the link to our GitHub where you can get the JSON file and upload this in your Sumo account. So this is pre-built dashboards that I use with my customers, and you can install it. And here's a quick preview. Monitors on the top, scheduled search on the bottom. So go ahead and visit that link in the chat if you want to get this dashboard and put it into your Sumo account. This is using audit data that's free in your account already there. So I'll pass it back to you, Rick, for a quick summary.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, that's just, I guess, a sneak peek of a lot of the wonderful value that you would get by being part of the TAM program at Sumo. Yeah, so just to summarize, hey, the main thing, there's 2 key things we're saying here. First on the slide, we're saying you need to balance the alerting strategy. That is actually like the hierarchy of needs from SRE, Google SRE. I guess we're saying think about it a little bit more widely than just the bottom of the pyramid there, because your alerts have got to come from a range of different places, and we want to balance specific domain alerting with really wide business impacting alerts as well. Go to the next slide. And the final one here, this is just summarizing what we've talked about. I'm not going to read through it because that would bore you all, but key things there: balance of alerts, monitors and SLOs are the best way to implement that in Sumo in terms of features. You want to have a well-defined response system in terms of who's responding and make sure that they're well trained. You want to know where you're routing your alerts to, and that's ideally some kind of ticketing response system rather than just an email bucket that's not really that well monitored. And lastly, we have that bonus content that we've put in the chat. An ongoing review is important.
Yep. Thanks, Rick. So now one final fun slide, no quiz here, but we're just going to now end the presentation and see if there's any questions while you observe some of these interesting images. And feel free to, go ahead, David.
Yep, I was going to say thank you to Graham and Rick on presenting today. For everyone that's on the call, please feel free to pop your questions into the chat box, and what we'll do is we'll work through answering them. Well,
Also just,
sorry, go ahead, Graham.
Sorry, David. I'm just going to add some of our emails as well, in case people want that for contact information and follow-up questions if you have some questions later.
Okay, so Graham, maybe a question for yourself from Andrew. He's asking, does Sumo provide example Terraform integrations in GitHub?
Yes. Yes, we do. I can actually show that if that's appropriate. I'll put a link here as well. See how many other questions we get. But yeah, the answer is yes. There's an example GitHub link. And we have our official provider on the Terraform website, which was useful to check out as well. And on that, one thing I recommend is if you, I think this is for Andrew's question. If you do plan to set up monitors using Terraform, you probably want to create a service account user, and then lock down the permissions to that folder to just that Terraform service account user, because you're probably going to have a mixture of real live users creating their own stuff in their own folders, in addition to Terraform controlled folder of production monitors. I've seen banks do this for their own compliance regulations, right? You need to closely monitor and audit and show change logs of how your production alerts have evolved over time, what coverage you had. So people achieve this by controlling their Sumo monitors, production specifically, through Terraform and a repo.
Right. Thanks, Graham. We've got a quite general question there around if we have a fine-tuning webinar on Sumo Cloud CSA. The answer to that is that we are looking for topics for upcoming webinars. It is actually a topic that we have discussed. What we really recommend for fine-tuning CSA in general is that you work with your TAM or you work with your CSA with Sumo Logic. But we definitely do want to present on that, and it is something we do frequently with customers. Rick, Graham, anything further you'd add to that?
No, I'd say you're right on the money there, David. We do often run sessions like that through the premium support program, with customers who have premium support and have a TAM. But that does sound like a great topic for another webinar for another time. I like that as an idea.
Yeah, some extra detail on CSE Cloud SEM fine tuning is start with your parsing and mapping. See if anything is failing. Make sure the data is getting in and mapped and parsed correctly. Then look at your rules firing. And we actually have a Cloud SEM app you could install in the core platform, and it will show you the noise, right? It'll show you the rules that are firing. And that'll tell you what to tune. So definitely, I think David's advice is great. Reach out to your Sumo team, customer success manager, account executive. They can route you to some technical help. And then fine tuning is usually specific to your security environment, but we can also definitely consider that for a next talk. That's a great subject.
Let me just see if there's any final questions, but there is one thing, Rick, I'm curious about. So observing a complex system, fire hose, torrent of alerts, giant pile of alerts, I get that. Engine made of donut and strings. What was going on there?
Oh, that one, I tried a different filter, and I think that one's actually DALL-E rather than the other ones are all Night Cafe. So yeah, that's an interesting one. But people often say that their microservices environment, especially in startup, grew very, very quickly, and often if you were looking towards running away with a pot of money after IPO, you're not necessarily designing stuff to last 10 or 20 years. You might be more thinking, hey, it's the what's on fire this week, and then what's on fire the week after that. So I think a lot of the microservices complexity and challenges for modern apps comes from that. People say that, that they were building the plane after they jumped off the cliff kind of thing with startup to some degree. So it can make for an interesting and complex environment for sure.
Great. We just have a final question there about the recording of this webinar. Just to confirm, we are going to send out the recording after this session. So I think we're just coming up on time. So again, I want to thank Graham and Rick for presenting today and putting so much time and effort into creating the webinar. And I want to thank everybody that attended. We really appreciate you taking time out to listen in. And hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. So wish you all a good day, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. It was fun.